Today, we're taking a really hard look at human trafficking. We're going to go way beyond the headlines to try and understand the systems, the money, and, the real human cost of a crisis that pretty much operates in the shadows. It all starts with a number, 49.6 million. Just let that sink in. That's the estimated number of people trapped in what we call modern slavery right this second. It's such a staggering figure, it's almost impossible to really comprehend. But what does a number like that actually mean? I mean, who are these millions of people? And what does their exploitation even look like on a day-to-day basis? That's exactly what we're going to break down. So here's how we'll do it. We'll start with the huge scale of the global crisis. Then we're going to follow the money into the $236 billion black market that fuels the whole thing. We'll look at the new faces of slavery, everything from cyber scams to the high seas. We'll then see how exploitation can hide in plain sight. And finally, we'll explore some real pathways to intervention. Okay, let's dive right in. To really get our heads around the scope of this, we've got to break down that massive number and see exactly who is being affected. So, out of those nearly 50 million people, a truly shocking 12 million of them are children. And what's really scary is that this problem is getting worse. Just between 2019 and 2022, the number of detected victims jumped by 25%. Now, while women and girls still make up the majority of victims, the big shift is in the kind of exploitation. There's been a massive 47% surge in victims detected for forced labor, making it the most common form for the first time. And this chart breaks it all down for us. You can see forced labor is now sitting at 42% of detected victims, just edging out sexual exploitation at 39%. But take a look at the other categories, right? Especially forced criminality at 8%. That's a rapidly growing area that we're definitely going to come back to later. This just shows you this isn't a single type of crime. It's a diverse, adaptable, and truly horrible market. So the big question is, why? Why does this crisis keep growing? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's incredibly profitable. To really understand the problem, you have to follow the money that drives this massive criminal enterprise. $236 billion. That is the estimated illegal profit generated by trafficking every single year. That's a 37% jump since 2014, making this one of the most lucrative criminal industries on the entire planet, right up there with the global drug trade. Now, here's where things get really interesting. I call this the profit paradox. Even though forced labor now has more victims, commercial sexual exploitation is just wildly more profitable. Think about this. It accounts for only about 27% of the victims, but it generates 73% of the total profits. We're talking a stunning $173 billion. This really shows you where the most intense economic demand for exploitation actually lies. And this table, wow. It just illustrates the cold, hard economics of it all. The annual profit per victim in sexual exploitation is over $27,000. Now compare that to someone in forced agriculture or domestic work, where the profit per person is maybe a couple $1,000s. This table literally puts a price tag on a human being, and that price is dictated entirely by the market they're forced into. Trafficking isn't some static crime that stays the same. It adapts to technology, to global markets, in some, frankly, terrifying new ways. The old images we might have of slavery, they just don't capture what's happening today in these high-tech scam compounds or out on the open ocean. One of the most insidious new forms is called pig butchering. It's a chilling name for a really complex crime that's exploding in Southeast Asia. Traffickers lure people with fake job ads, and then they force them to run online romance and investment scams. The name comes from the idea of fattening up a target with trust before you butcher them financially. The worker is a victim, and the person they're scamming on the other end is also a victim. It's truly awful. And here's the pipeline for how it works. It all starts with a super promising job ad you might see online. But when the person shows up, they find themselves trapped in a heavily guarded compound. They're forced to work insane hours running these scams. And if they don't hit their financial quotas, they're tortured. The UN estimates hundreds of thousands of people are trapped in these compounds as we speak. And then, far away from the digital world, there's another hidden form of slavery that's been going on for years at sea. In the global fishing industry, especially in Southeast Asia, workers are tricked onto boats where they can be trapped for years at a time. They're working under absolutely brutal conditions. And their catch, Well, it enters the global seafood supply chain, and it ends up on plates all around the world. Okay, now we're moving into a really challenging area. We're going to talk about how systems that many of us see as totally legitimate, like international adoption and surrogacy, can actually be corrupted by the exact same economic pressures and vulnerabilities that drive trafficking.
This is the voice of Tarquel Lemma. She was taken from her mother in Ethiopia under the false promise of a better life through adoption. Her fight today highlights this dark pattern where the intense demand for children from wealthy countries creates a market. And in that market, brokers can deceive or coerce families in poverty into giving up their kids, which is, by definition, a form of human trafficking.
You see a really similar power imbalance in the global surrogacy market. Just look at these numbers. Intended parents from a country like the US might pay up to $200,000 for the whole process. But the surrogate, say in a country like Ukraine, where the GDP per person is a tiny fraction of that, might only get $15,000. This huge economic gap creates a profound vulnerability, and you guessed it, the potential for exploitation. So, after seeing the scale, the economics, and all these different methods, the big question is what on earth can be done about it? And the answer isn't some single magic bullet. It's about dismantling this entire market from a bunch of different angles. A real comprehensive framework for action looks something like this. You have to start by addressing the root causes. Things like poverty and lack of opportunity. You have to strengthen labor laws, increase accountability for traffickers, and provide way better services for victims. But there's a huge piece of this puzzle, one we often overlook, and that's reducing the demand. So what does reducing demand actually mean in practice? Well, it means tackling the demand for commercial sex head on. It means pushing for transparent supply chains so we're not unknowingly buying products made with slave labor. It means reforming systems like adoption and surrogacy to protect the vulnerable. And it means ending this idea that the people who consume these services and goods have zero responsibility. Which brings us right to our final thought. Human trafficking isn't just some distant, abstract problem. It is a market. And a market thrives on demand. The clothes we wear, the seafood we eat, the technology we use every day. It all has a supply chain. So the real question we have to leave you with is this. Where in our own modern lives, in our own consumption habits, are we helping to create the demand that fuels this entire crisis?